Hey everyone, I'm Kristy Norris and I'll be presenting with Sandra Greer. We'll be talking about counseling clients of Asian descent. To give you a brief overview of where we're headed, we'll be talking about who represents this group, immigration and discrimination. We'll talk about their culture and values, as well as some neologisms. Sandra will talk about general mental health issues, multi-generational trauma and impact, as well as prevailing psychological distress and counseling Asian Americans. Well, when you think about those of Asian descent, what do you think about? It's easy to think in terms of one big category. However, Asian Americans represent three broad yet really distinct groups. There's East Asia, which consists of China, Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines, and Korea. And then there's South Asia, which represents India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, to name a few. And then Southeast Asia, which represents Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Myanmar. So there are over 43 different Asian ethnicities spanning across over 20 different countries of origin. So you can see the implications of this when someone of Asian descent walks into your counseling office, right? Where do you even begin to understand their background? So immigration has been a common thread shared by Asian ethnic groups. There's the push factor or the pull factor. And so these two terms kind of give us an understanding. So of pushed is someone who has left their country for because of political strife, economic instability, social persecution, famine, or war. And those who have been pulled are lured to the U.S. because of the prospect of earning a lot financially, maybe the availability of high-paying jobs, as well as the potential to provide for one's family. Those who are pulled may be highly motivated or educated. And so we see with immigration comes discrimination. If you've ever been to a Chinatown, they were actually created because Chinese Americans were restricted from living among whites. They weren't able to buy their own land. They weren't able to own property. They weren't able to intermarry with whites or even obtain an education. And so we can see that they have been discriminated against, and we also still see it today. And then this term model minority. This is used to describe and elevate Asian American status. They're thought of as compliant and hardworking, and they don't rock the boat. So this 47-year-old Vietnamese American, she says, societal perception of Asian Americans as model minority has deep consequences for us all, as well as for other minority groups. The effects are complex, but to put it simply, people in society perceive Asian Americans as smart and hardworking, but definitely not as innovative, creator, or leadership type. These are just some examples. People want us to be productive members of society, but they definitely do not want us to be leaders, and in fact do not believe we have the capacity to be leaders. So what do you think about this? Do you believe that Asian Americans can be leaders? Do you believe that they can be creative or even innovative? So I want to show you a clip about an Asian American woman who overcame this stereotype, who didn't represent the model minority. So let's watch this clip.
The Oscar goes to Michelle Yeoh.
Thank you. Thank you. For all the little boys and girls who look like me watching tonight, this is a beacon of hope and possibilities. This is proof that dreams dream big and dreams do come true. And ladies, don't let anybody tell you you are ever past your prime. Never give up.
So now to you, this may look like just another Oscar winner. However, in the eyes of an Asian American woman, this is Michelle Yeoh. She's the first actress, she's the first Asian American woman to win Best Actress at the Oscars. In the video, she talked about how the award was for all the little boys and girls that looked like her. Why is this significant? Because growing up, we did not see a single Asian American represented on TV or in the media. So this shows that there's hope for the Asian American that doesn't want to be in the stereotypical box. That they can be creative and innovative. And so, like Michelle, she states at the end of her video, this is history in the making, and it's really significant.
The Oscar goes to.
And so if we're going to counsel Asian Americans, we'll want to understand their culture and their values. So the first value is family. Family is a huge value and of primary importance. Their relationships can encompass several generations, so it's important to understand their dynamics in this area. Gender and roles, we see that in this culture that they have specific gender roles and expectations, as well as communication rules. Generally, age is seen as valued the older that you get. Elders are more respected, and they are extremely important in their culture. In relationships, we see that harmony is a high value. Asians can be non-directive, non-confrontational, as well as silent on issues where they should maybe speak up. And so they may not show their emotions as well, because emotions typically are seen as immaturity. Then we'll also look at education. Education has been a high value for Asian Americans. We see, you hear about parents being hard on their children because they want them to be successful. But if you understand a refugee family, of course they want their children to grow up with money, being able to provide for their family. And so this reflects your education, and your success reflects the greater, the bigger, the more collective family. And then religion. So religion can range depending on region. So we'll see Buddhism, Catholicism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam. So all types of different religions depending on the different regions. So this will be important as you counsel Asian Americans, understanding that there are a lot of different ethnicities, and the way that they hold these values will look a lot different depending on who you're talking to. And so let's look at a few neologisms or new terms that have emerged from individuals of Asian descent. I don't know if you've heard of Marie Kondo, but she is a Japanese American who started her own organizational business. And as she was organizing, she came up with this concept of sparking joy. If the clothing sparks joy, then you keep it. If it doesn't, then you get rid of it. Another neologism that has emerged recently is this term called lying flat. It means taking a break from relentless work. This movement was started in 2021, where there's increased pressure to work after the pandemic and to work even harder. So this man from China was kind of uprooted his values. He didn't want to work. He didn't want to work as hard as he used to, where he was working 60 to 70 hours per week. He wanted to change his value system. And so I'll end with this, a voice that I've been listening to as an Asian American that has been super helpful for me is Jenny Wang. She's a psychologist in the Houston area, and she wrote a book called Permission to Come Home, Reclaiming Mental Health as Asian Americans. In her book, she says, as people of color and immigrants, the act of taking up space may trigger a whole host of threat and fear of signals. Sometimes we are the only Asian or person of color in the room. Not only are we fighting for our own personhood and space, but we may be viewed as representing our entire community in that fight. The lack of representation of Asians in higher leadership, politics, sports, media, and elsewhere means that taking up space can be terrifying and a lonely. And so recognizing this, that when you are counseling a client of Asians, it's important that that even when they walk into your office, it's a huge step for them. They're saying, I want to take up space. I want to use my voice, but I need help. And it's frustrating and it's hard. So we have the privilege of coming alongside and meeting each individual where they're at, made in God's image, and helping them to hold their individual pain for where they come from. And so So yeah, with that, would highly recommend listening to Jenny Wang's videos and even just reading her book. It's a super helpful resource. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Sandra to talk about general mental health issues that Asian Americans experience and how to counsel them.
Hi, I'm Sandra Greer, and I'll be presenting on the remainder of our presentation, beginning with multi-generational trauma and answering the question, what is it? So, intergenerational trauma refers to trauma that is passed from a trauma survivor to their descendant. It can also be referred to as transgenerational or multi-generational trauma. What's happening here is the DNA is literally coding itself to have a survival response, and this response is passed down for multiple generations in the absence of additional trauma. Intergenerational trauma encompasses a wide range of countries, ethnicities, nationalities, and identities. Doesn't matter what the reason is, they all carry over the trauma with them when they come. So, looking at psychological distress of the Asian American, we need to note that it is a relatively new field of research and we're still learning. So, there's going to be a lot of contradictory information. So, I took the research that I found and the things that I saw with most frequency is what I'm reporting to you today. So, what are some of the factors that lead to psychological distress? Well, for one, generational status. The age at immigration plays into the prevalence of psychiatric disorders. A child who immigrated is more likely to have a psychiatric disorder, whereas a later generational immigrant is less likely to experience as much distress. Microaggressions is another. 98% of Asian Americans have experienced microaggressions, which are subtle and unconscious expressions of prejudice towards marginalized people groups. Another microaggression would be the model minority myth, which is an ascription of intelligence being assigned to a person of color on the basis of their race. This can bring up somatic symptoms, low self-esteem, trauma, as well as depression. Racism is another. Our Asian American veterans are reportedly healthier than all other veterans. However, they show more severe signs of PTSD due to race-related stressors endured from fellow soldiers. Also, our former president's repeated use of the Chinese virus helped fuel an environment of hatred towards our Asian Americans. Also, Asian American foreign-born immigrants experience more racism than our U.S.-born Asian Americans. Racism stress is linked to depression, hypervigilance, physical reactions, low self-esteem, avoidance, intrusion, anger, and PTSD. Other race-based factors could include stereotypes such as the perpetual foreigner, stigma like shame and guilt, expectations from not only society but also family, as well as religious intolerance. Studies have shown that Asian Americans experience major depressive disorder at a rate that is equal to or lower than that of the general population. But as you can see from these numbers here, it is on the rise. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Pre-immigration trauma, particularly among the Southeast Asian refugees, consistently shows incidences of PTSD. In a study of Cambodians, they found that 99% reported near-death starvation, while 90% reported family and friends being murdered, and 54% reported being tortured. Remember, this has a multi-generational effect and impact. I want to preface the suicidal ideation by saying that their suicide rate is really less than half of the general population. However, the leading cause of death for Asian American males aged 15 to 24 is suicide, while their white counterpart was accidental injury. Also, males that are 85 plus are at a higher risk for suicide. In the ages of 9th through 12th grade males have a 30% more chance at considering suicide. Intimate partner violence. This is where it really shows you that we need to look at those within group numbers and study those a little more closely for your specific population. Because here you can see that while Korean women had a 60% more likelihood of intimate partner violence, the Japanese women over in Los Angeles only were experiencing at a rate of 33%. So counseling Asian Americans, what to consider and where to go. Some of the challenges that you're going to face is just in general, they seek alternative forms of medicine. So some of them might seek a pastor before coming to see a mental health counselor. Since they have a high somatic symptoms, they might go see the general practitioner instead of coming to see you. In addition, those that have used mental health, it's being underutilized now due to discrimination and unsatisfying treatment. They also have barriers to overcome, such as stigmas, high cost, and lack of knowledge. So, what are some of the variables that we need to understand? Well, their language. We need to know that they're family centered. Restraint of feelings and silence is respect. They're going to be more seeking advice. They're going to be looking for well-defined patterns of interaction. They're going to be more private versus more public. So shame, disgrace, and pride are not going to be really easily seen. Physical and mental well-being is defined differently. And then their extended family is more of an extension of self. If they are lower SES, we're going to see non-standard English, more action-oriented needs, different time perspective, and then immediate short-range goals would be necessary. This is a list of things that you would need to assess before beginning counseling your client. Just a few here, like immigrant generation or socioeconomic status. All of these things can help you determine where to begin and how to approach counseling with them. As a quick reference, just so you can see here, the psychotic symptoms are at 46.6%. This is consistent with literature that states that our Asian American population will delay seeking treatment until their symptoms are chronic and or severe. So be aware of this before they walk into your office. Client expectations. We have to be careful to explain the nature of the assessment and treatment process and the necessity of obtaining personal information and the insight of family dynamics. We also need to look at concrete goals and strategies that they're focused on solutions. We're going to serve as a director, a helper, offering advice and consultation. We're not going to impose technique or be highly directive. Instead, we're going to take an active role in structuring the sessions and outlining expectations. And remember that we are the expert in therapy, but they are the expert in his or her own life. Two models here. We've got solution focused as well as cognitive behavior. Keeping in mind that our therapy should be time limited, solution focused, present or immediate future centered. And then we need to alter our approach so that it's not having an individualistic perspective, but to be able to include a collectivist nature to it. Assertiveness training, what this could look like here is that whenever they're at home, we would teach them to be less assertive, so culturally. But whenever they're maybe at work, we could teach them that socially being assertive would be appropriate. So for post-traumatic stress disorder, here are two different models you could look at. For the child, you could look at trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. And then for the adult, you could do culturally adaptive form of cognitive behavior therapy. And then listed below each of these is a list of components that would be included within those therapies. Shame, humiliation, and anger, we need to be aware of where these are coming from. So when we look at relational cultural theory and anger resolution therapy and addictions model of therapy, all of these could help us to move our client away from shaming and humiliating thoughts and feelings. And then assimilation and acculturation are other issues that could come into your office. So acculturative stress and culture shock could be issues that they are dealing with. The Sioux and Lu Asian self-identity measurement model, and then the Berry Cross cultural model of acculturation could help you in processing their acculturation process and the stress associated with it. And then last, family systems theory is another one whose characteristics would be consistent with world views of collectivist cultures. So we need to assess the hierarchical nature of the family, or are they more egalitarian in structure? And then we need to kind of figure out what is their perception of what a healthy family looks like. We need to focus on positive aspects of the family and then reframe conflicts to reduce confrontation. And so that sums up my end of the presentation. I hope you found it very helpful today.